There comes a moment in life when you open your eyes and realize most people never truly look. They walk through the world half awake, guided by noise, rushing toward illusions they never question. But you began to notice the details they overlook, the shifts in tone, the hidden intentions, the truth buried beneath someone's carefully crafted smile. And the moment you started seeing what others don't, you stepped into a different world, a quieter world, a sharper world, a world where clarity is both a blessing and a burden. Because once you see the truth, really see it, you can never unsee it, and that changes everything. The lonely gift of awareness. There is a strange, almost haunting beauty in being the one who notices what others walk past without a second thought. It is not a skill taught in books, nor is it a talent you boast about at gatherings. It is a quiet instinct, an internal sensitivity that allows you to pick up the subtle shifts in a room, the slight tremors in someone's voice, the unspoken hesitation behind a confident smile. And while most people celebrate awareness as a strength, few speak about its hidden cost, the loneliness that comes with seeing too much, too clearly. Because the moment you begin to understand what others ignore, you also begin to feel the distance grow between you and the world you once blended into. Awareness, true awareness, is not loud. It does not demand attention. It moves like a shadow, asking you to observe rather than react, to study rather than judge, to understand rather than confront. And it is in these silent observations that you begin to realize how different your path has become, not by choice, but by transformation. Those who do not see the things you see will never understand the weight you carry. You notice patterns long before they form into consequences. You sense insincerity before it reveals itself. You recognize the early signs of trouble, tension, or betrayal long before anyone else feels the shift. And instead of feeling empowered, you find yourself silently wishing you didn't know so much. Because awareness doesn't just open your eyes, it sharpens them to a razor edge, making every detail louder, every intention clearer, every truth more uncomfortably visible. There is no turning it off. You cannot unsee what your mind has already decoded. You cannot unknow what your intuition has already confirmed. And so you carry this gift, this burden, with a quiet dignity that nobody applauds. People often say they want the truth. They claim they want honesty, clarity, transparency. But when confronted with someone who actually notices the truth, someone who sees through pretenses, distractions, and illusions, they become uneasy. Your clarity exposes what they are trying to hide, even from themselves, and suddenly your presence becomes a mirror they never asked to look into. This is the loneliness of awareness. You are no longer seen as simply another person in the room. You become the one who knows, the one who understands too much, the one who sees beyond the surface. And because of that, people instinctively distance themselves, not out of malice, but out of discomfort. The human mind is more afraid of being understood than it is of being ignored. Awareness also changes the way you interact with the world. Where others see coincidences, you see patterns. Where others accept explanations, you look for meaning. Where others engage in noise, you notice the silence beneath it. You learn to interpret body language like a second language. You learn to listen, not to what people say, but what they resist saying. And most importantly, you learn to rely on your own perception more than anyone else's opinion. This independence of thought sets you apart because once you start thinking for yourself, you cannot go back to living from borrowed beliefs. You begin to question everything, conversations, relationships, promises, routines, not out of paranoia, but out of awareness. You understand that nothing in life is random. Everything has a cause, a motive, a consequence, and with every detail you absorb, you become less naive, more discerning, more grounded in reality. Many people misunderstand this sensitivity. They assume you are distant because you are cold. They assume you are quiet because you are unsure. They assume you observe because you are disconnected. They fail to grasp that you are not retreating from the world. You are studying it. You are analyzing it. You are choosing your responses carefully, not recklessly. Awareness turns your silence into strength. It teaches you that you do not need to react to everything you notice. You do not need to expose every truth you uncover. You do not need to correct every wrong you perceive. Sometimes the greatest power lies in simply knowing, and that knowledge becomes a shield, a guide, and a source of calm. But even though awareness is isolating, it is not a punishment. It is a form of elevation. It pulls you out of the noise and allows you to see life with clarity that most people spend their entire lives chasing. Awareness becomes your compass, your armor, your filter. It helps you avoid manipulation, deception, and unnecessary conflict. It helps you choose your circle wisely. It protects you from falling into traps that others willingly walk into. It reveals opportunities others dismiss as insignificant, and slowly you learn to appreciate the very loneliness that once intimidated you. Because it is in that loneliness that you discover your identity, your insight, and your strength. In the end, awareness is not about seeing what others don't. It's about becoming the person others can't become, not because they can't learn to see, but because they are not ready to handle the truth that comes with sight. And you were born ready. The weight of silent observation. There is a unique kind of strength that does not roar, does not demand recognition, and does not seek applause. It exists in silence, in the quiet act of watching, listening, and understanding without the need to interrupt. Silent observation is not passivity. It is a discipline, a deliberate choice to see the world for what it truly is rather than what people claim it to be. And yet, this discipline comes with a weight that most people will never feel, because most people move through life seeking noise, distraction, and validation. But the one who observes silently carries a different burden, the burden of clarity, of being awake in a world that prefers to sleep through the truth. When you stand still and watch what others rush past, you absorb details they never notice. You catch inconsistencies in their stories, tension in their expressions, and hesitation in their decisions. You begin to see how people reveal themselves not through their words, but through their contradictions. And with every detail you register, your understanding deepens, and the weight of that understanding settles quietly on your shoulders. People misunderstand the silent observer. They assume your quiet nature means you lack confidence. They assume your calmness means you are indifferent. They assume your stillness means you have nothing to say. But the truth is far from that. You are quiet because you are thinking. You are calm because you understand. You are still because you choose to be, not because you are forced to be. And when you observe silently, you learn to separate what is real from what is performed. You begin to see intentions hidden behind kindness, impatience disguised as enthusiasm, jealousy masked as concern. You see what others do not, because you are not distracted by the noise. You are not pulled into the theatrics of emotion. You are not fooled by appearances. Your silence sharpens your vision, and that vision carries a heavy responsibility. Silent observation reveals how predictable human behavior can be. You start to recognize patterns in how people react when they are insecure, defensive, or dishonest. You notice how the same few behaviors repeat across different situations, different faces, different stories. You understand that people are often inconsistent when they are hiding something, overly expressive when they seek approval, or strangely quiet when they are controlling their narrative. You begin to read these patterns like a map, one that shows you not just where someone is heading, but why. And that understanding can be both powerful and painful, because when you see the truth behind the mask, you can no longer pretend the mask is real. You cannot believe excuses when you know the motive. You cannot accept explanations when you understand the intention. You cannot ignore the truth when your intuition has already confirmed it. This is the weight of silent observation. You see the storm long before anyone else feels the wind. You notice the shift in someone's behavior before they admit something is wrong. You sense the distance in someone's tone before they confess their change of heart. And because of this, you often carry the emotional burden of knowing what is coming before anyone else does. You prepare yourself for realities others deny. You brace yourself for outcomes others are not ready to face. You detach not because you don't care, but because you have seen enough to understand what must be accepted. The silent observer feels the impact of truth earlier, deeper, and more intensely. Yet this wait is not always negative. Silent observation gives you something rare: time. Time to prepare, time to process, time to adjust. While others are shocked by sudden revelations, you are not. While others struggle to understand why something happened, you already saw the signs. While others second-guess their decisions, you trust your assessment. This gives you an advantage that cannot be taught, an intuitive foresight that protects you from chaos, manipulation, and emotional instability. People may think you are distant, but the truth is that you simply do not waste your energy reacting to every situation. You wait, you watch, you analyze. Because silent observation has taught you that the first impression is often deceptive. The loudest voice is often insecure, and the most confident person is often the most fragile. Silent observation also teaches you patience. You understand that the truth reveals itself without your intervention. You do not need to confront every inconsistency. You do not need to expose every falsehood. You do not need to correct every misunderstanding. Sometimes the wisest response is no response at all, because silence is not the absence of power. It is the presence of control. It is the choice to rise above impulsive reactions. It is the decision to value clarity over chaos. It is the understanding that truth unfolds at its own pace, and when it does, it leaves no room for denial. But perhaps the heaviest part of being a silent observer is accepting that not everyone wants to be seen clearly. Some people feel threatened when you notice too much. Some grow uncomfortable when you understand their motives. Some distance themselves because your clarity leaves no room for their illusions. And because of this, you may find yourself standing alone more often than others. Not because you failed to connect, but because you connected too deeply, too accurately, too honestly. This is the paradox of the silent observer. You understand people so well that many choose to walk away before they can be understood too fully. Still, despite the weight, there is strength in this role. Silent observation turns you into someone who cannot be easily deceived or influenced. It gives you inner stability in a world that thrives on emotional turbulence. It teaches you discernment. Who deserves your energy? Who deserves your distance? And who deserves nothing at all? And in the end, this weight becomes a part of your identity, shaping you into someone who walks through life with calm awareness and unshakable clarity. Silent observation is not a burden meant to break you, it is a responsibility meant to elevate you. The courage to stand apart. There comes a point in every awakened person's life when they realize that seeing the world clearly means no longer walking with the crowd. Not because they reject others, but because their vision naturally pulls them onto a different path. Standing apart is not the result of arrogance, but awareness. It happens the moment you understand that blending in requires you to shrink your truth, silence your instincts, and dull your perception. And once you experience clarity, once you recognize patterns and motives with precision, you cannot force yourself back into the comfort of ignorance. This is where courage becomes essential, because to stand apart is not to be alone. It is to be brave enough to choose the path that aligns with truth, even when that path is quieter, narrower, and far less celebrated. Standing apart means trusting your own judgment over the noise around you. It means believing what you see, not what you are told. Most people rely on the approval of the majority to validate their decisions, but the one who sees clearly learns early that the majority is not always right. Crowds follow trends, not truth. They chase acceptance, not authenticity. They cling to comfort, not clarity. But you, the one who observes, understands, and thinks deeply, cannot follow a direction simply because everyone else does. You know better. You sense when something is wrong, even when others insist it is right. You pull back when others rush forward. You hesitate not out of fear, but out of intuition. And this ability, this internal compass, demands courage because it is far easier to walk with the crowd than it is to walk with your own conviction. People often misunderstand those who stand apart. They misinterpret your distance as judgment. They misread your silence as weakness. They assume you are detached because you do not care. But standing apart has nothing to do with disconnection. It is a sign of strength, clarity, and emotional maturity. You refuse to get caught in the chaos that blinds others. You refuse to participate in conversations that lack depth. You refuse to join circles where superficiality is celebrated. You refuse to entertain behaviors that insult your intelligence. And this refusal is a form of courage, because it requires you to prioritize authenticity over acceptance. Many people bend themselves into shapes that fit the expectations of others, but you refuse to betray yourself just to be included. The courage to stand apart also means embracing the discomfort that comes with it. You will be misunderstood. You will be questioned. You will be misjudged. People may call you quiet, distant, difficult to read, but they do not realize that your silence is a shield, your distance is a filter, and your unreadability is a strength. You are not trying to impress anyone. You are preserving your inner clarity. You are not withdrawing from the world. You are choosing which parts of it deserve your presence. You are not afraid of connection. You are simply uninterested in superficial bonds. And this careful selection of where you place your energy creates an aura that sets you apart without you ever intending to stand out. Standing apart also means refusing to ignore the red flags others continuously excuse. While people allow themselves to be convinced by charm, appearances, or empty promises, you see beyond the surface. When someone's words do not match their actions, you notice the inconsistency. When someone seeks attention more than respect, you study the motive. When someone tries to manipulate a narrative, you catch the shift. And instead of confronting conflict head-on, you quietly step back. You do not justify what feels wrong. You do not tolerate what feels unstable. You do not entertain what feels fake. This ability to walk away without drama, without explanation, without hesitation is one of the strongest forms of courage a person can possess. It means your peace is not negotiable. It means your standards are not flexible. It means your intuition is your guardian, not your enemy. But standing apart does not mean living without impact. On the contrary, the ones who stand apart often leave the deepest imprint. They influence not through their presence in crowds, but through the strength of their solitude. Their thoughts are clearer because they are not clouded by conformity. Their decisions are wiser because they are not pressured by expectations. Their lives are more aligned because they follow inner truth, not outer noise. People may not understand them at first, but eventually they respect them because consistency is undeniable and authenticity is unforgettable. You become the person others seek for answers when their illusions finally collapse. Standing apart also gives you the freedom to grow. When you are not tethered to the opinions of others, you evolve at your own pace. You learn without fear of judgment. You think without fear of disagreement. You explore without fear of contradiction. This freedom shapes you into someone who cannot be manipulated, controlled, or swayed by superficial influence. You develop a rooted identity, strong, steady, and unshakable, and that identity becomes your anchor in a world that constantly shifts. In the end, standing apart is not about separation, it is about elevation. It is rising above the illusions that trap others. It is recognizing the value of solitude over senseless noise. It is choosing authenticity over approval, wisdom over popularity, truth over comfort. It means you see what others don't, and you are strong enough to walk the path your vision reveals. And the courage to stand apart becomes the very thing that sets you free. The responsibility of insight. There is a moment in every perceptive person's life when awareness stops being a simple advantage and becomes a responsibility, one that is heavier, deeper, and more demanding than it first appears. When you possess insight, you don't just see situations, you see through them. You don't just hear words, you hear intentions. You don't just witness behavior, you recognize patterns, motives, and consequences long before they unfold. And with this clarity comes a choice. To speak, to stay silent, or to walk away. Each choice carries a different cost. Each choice holds a different form of courage. Insight, therefore, is not a passive gift. It is a duty, one that shapes your relationships, your decisions, and the path you ultimately walk. People often talk about knowledge as power, but they never speak about the responsibility that accompanies understanding the things others ignore. When you begin to see the real dynamics behind actions, you realize how fragile truth can be. Most people live on the surface, believing what is convenient rather than what is accurate. They prefer comforting lies over uncomfortable clarity. They cling to illusions because illusions protect them from reality. But you, with your insight, do not have the luxury of remaining blind. You see when someone's apology is a tactic to reset control. You recognize when someone's kindness is a strategy, not sincerity. You sense when a situation is shifting in a direction others refuse to acknowledge, and this puts you in a difficult position. Do you reveal what you see, knowing it may cause conflict, denial, or discomfort? Or do you hold your insight quietly, accepting the weight of knowing more than you can safely express? Insight also demands emotional discipline. It is not enough to recognize someone's motives. You must also understand how to navigate them without exposing your awareness prematurely. You learn to respond strategically rather than emotionally. You learn to speak selectively rather than impulsively. You learn to reveal what you know only when it serves a higher purpose, not simply because you can. And this level of restraint requires strength, it requires patience, it requires wisdom. Many misunderstand this restraint as passivity, but it is the opposite. It is control. It is power under discipline. It is the ability to carry truth without allowing truth to carry you into unnecessary battles. You also begin to see that insight makes you responsible for your own boundaries. When you can see someone's intentions long before their actions confirm them, you no longer have the excuse of claiming you didn't know better. You can no longer ignore red flags. You can no longer entertain inconsistent behavior. You can no longer let your empathy override your understanding. Insight forces you to protect yourself, sometimes earlier than you want to, sometimes more firmly than others expect. It pushes you to walk away from situations others are still trying to make sense of. It asks you to distance yourself before the damage unfolds. And while this may appear cold or distant, it is in fact self-respect. When you know better, you must act better. Insight leaves you no choice. Another responsibility of insight is understanding when to intervene and when to let things unfold naturally. Not every truth needs to be spoken. Not every problem requires your involvement. Not every realization needs to be shared. Sometimes the wisest thing you can do is step back and allow people to meet the consequences they have been avoiding. Intervening prematurely can rob someone of the lesson they need. Exposing the truth at the wrong moment can cause more chaos than clarity. Insight teaches you that timing matters. Not just what you reveal, but when you reveal it. And sometimes the smartest, most responsible action is to say nothing at all and observe silently until the truth naturally rises to the surface. Insight also gives you the responsibility of fairness. When you see deeply, you are obligated to judge slowly. You understand that people behave from their wounds, their fears, their past, and their insecurities. You recognize that harmful behavior often comes from hidden pain. And while insight does not excuse wrongdoing, it gives you the ability to understand context, intention, and emotional complexity. This understanding shapes how you respond, not with impulsive anger, but with thoughtful clarity. You become someone who can hold both truth and compassion simultaneously, even when it is difficult. Yet perhaps the greatest responsibility of insight is choosing who deserves access to your understanding. Not everyone is ready for your clarity. Not everyone can handle being seen accurately. Some people feel threatened when their motives are understood. Some become defensive when their patterns are noticed. Some will distance themselves because your awareness leaves no room for their illusions. And so, you learn to reveal only what is necessary. You learn to share your insights selectively, wisely, and with intention. Your awareness becomes something sacred, something you do not hand out lightly. In the end, insight shapes you into someone who carries truth with grace. You learn that seeing clearly is not about superiority. It is about responsibility. It is about understanding the delicate balance between observation and action. It is about knowing when to speak and when silence is wiser. It is about recognizing that truth is powerful, but only in the hands of someone who uses it with purpose and restraint. And you, precisely because you see what others do not, are someone who must hold that power with care. Insight is not a burden meant to overwhelm you. It is a calling meant to refine you. It demands strength. It demands courage. It demands wisdom. And you are becoming the kind of person who can carry all three. The quiet power of knowing. There is a rare strength that does not shout, does not seek attention, and does not need validation. It is the quiet power of knowing, knowing who you are, what you see, and what you will no longer accept. This kind of power is not built on dominance or ego. It is built on clarity. It begins the moment you understand that awareness is not merely an ability, but a shield that protects you from deception, manipulation, and emotional distortion. When you possess the quiet power of knowing, you become someone who cannot be easily fooled, shaken, or controlled, not because you are hard, but because you are awake. You see the truth behind words, the intention behind gestures, and the emotion behind silence. And this understanding gives you a kind of inner stability that others can feel the moment they step near you. Knowing creates an aura around you. People can sense it even before they identify it. You do not need to announce that you see through falsehood. Your presence itself makes it clear. You do not need to expose anyone's hidden motives. Your awareness makes them uncomfortable enough to reveal themselves through their own nervousness. Those who live dishonestly often avoid you, not because you threaten them, but because you make them visible. Your clarity shines light into the spaces they prefer to keep dark. And so, without ever raising your voice or confronting anyone, you naturally filter out the insincere, the manipulative, and the unstable. This is one of the greatest advantages of knowing. It removes the people who would waste your energy long before they get the chance to break your peace. But the quiet power of knowing is not only about others, it's about yourself. When you know your own strength, you no longer feel the need to respond to every attack, prove yourself in every disagreement, or defend yourself against every misunderstanding. You realize that silence holds more authority than explanation. You learn that walking away is often more powerful than winning an argument. You understand that not every situation requires your presence, not every conflict deserves your energy, and not every person has earned access to your mind or emotions. This self-control is not weakness, it is mastery. It is the ability to stay centered while others are losing themselves. It is the confidence to remain calm in situations that would have once triggered you. And this calmness is not emptiness, it is strength under absolute control. Knowing also teaches you timing. You understand that everything reveals itself eventually. Lies fall apart, masks crack, intentions slip. You no longer rush to confront or expose. You wait, you observe, you allow truth to do its own work. This patience is not passivity, it is strategic wisdom. You have seen enough to understand that the right truth spoken at the wrong time becomes noise, and silence held at the right moment becomes clarity. This rhythm, this intuitive sense of when to act and when to withdraw, gives you an advantage that few people possess. It allows you to respond with precision rather than emotion, purpose rather than impulse. There is also a deep peace that comes with knowing. You are no longer overwhelmed by the uncertainty that troubles others. You no longer cling to people or situations out of fear of loss. You no longer allow temporary emotions to dictate permanent decisions. Instead, you make choices grounded in observation, reflection, and intuition. You trust yourself. And because you trust yourself, your life becomes more aligned, your boundaries more stable, and your direction more clear. Knowing gives you freedom, the freedom to choose, to walk away, to rebuild, and to grow without the noise of doubt stealing your clarity. But perhaps the most powerful aspect of knowing is that it makes you untouchable in a way that is quiet, subtle, and profound. Not because nothing affects you, but because nothing disturbs your center. You have learned that most conflict is noise, most drama is distraction, and most negativity reflects the inner turmoil of others, not your own. And so you do not internalize what was never yours to carry. You do not fight battles that do not belong to you. You do not absorb emotions that were never your responsibility. This emotional discipline is what sets you apart. It is what makes you unshakable. The quiet power of knowing also changes how you move through the world. You walk differently, not arrogantly, but with purpose. You speak differently, not loudly, but with weight. You love differently, not recklessly, but with awareness. You set boundaries not from fear, but from self-respect. You choose people not from loneliness, but from discernment. Everything about you becomes intentional. Everything becomes aligned. And because of this, your presence becomes a force, steady, calm, and undeniable. In the end, knowing is not about being superior or distant. It is about being free, free from illusions, free from manipulation, free from the need to prove your worth. It is about standing firmly in your truth, trusting your intuition, and carrying your awareness like a quiet flame, steady, controlled, and impossible to extinguish. The quiet power of knowing does not make you louder, it makes you deeper. It does not make you harder, it makes you wiser. And in a world full of noise, distraction, and confusion, being someone who truly knows is the greatest power you can possess.